Well, hello everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope you are doing well. We're running a little bit behind today. We had some tech issues on my side, and so we figured out a workaround. And so here we are. But everyone, welcome to the Impact Tribe podcast, where we meet exceptional people who are having a positive impact on the world. I'm your host, Ashley Bright. We are streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you're watching us on LinkedIn or later listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow, or on YouTube, please subscribe. I want to give a big shout out to our new sponsor, MakerTank. MakerTank is the all-in-one command center for founders and small business owners ready to ditch the chaos and scale with clarity. MakerTank allows you to centralize, automate, and actually run your business without drowning in busy work. So visit MakerTank today to join the exclusive Founders Waitlist. All right, now I'm excited to get to my guest today. I want to welcome a storyteller, an HR disruptor, and founder of La Cienega Advisory, a firm that is reimagining employee offboarding and mental health in the workplace. A first-generation Mexican-American with deep roots in Nogales and a decade in HR. She's now turning her lived experience into tools for healing, dignity, and change. Everyone, please put your hands together for Yahaira Jauregui. Yay!
I love when people just go all for it and say my name and all of it. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I will be very frank and honest. It took a little work to make sure I was saying it correctly and a little practice. So I'm glad that it resonated.
And I really appreciate it. It's so interesting, right? When you hear others speak about yourself too, it just gives you a different perspective. And just hearing other individuals in the community give me those shout outs and those reminders of the accomplishments is awesome. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I absolutely hear you. It doesn't matter kind of what our accomplishments are or our experiences are. We forget all we've been through and all we've overcome. And it's nice to have people remind us. And so I'm glad that I could do that for you today. So where are you coming to us from? I know we were concerned we might have some tech issues. So tell us where you're at.
Yeah, I'm actually at the moment been a transitionary period for me. So I've been relocated with my mom for some time while I figure out my company and all that. And I'm down in
Mm-hmm.
Nogales, Arizona,
Okay.
where I was born and basically raised. A beautiful hometown, border town. I truly got to experience the best of both worlds. I reflect on that, especially in the current political aspect of the country. I am just really grateful that I had this experience. I
Mm-hmm.
truly that I had the best of two worlds, both as an American, very proud to say that this country has allowed me to gain an education and so many other wonderful qualities and opportunities. But I also love my heritage, where I come from. I love going to the ranch and being in nature and just seeing another side of the world as well, right? So truly love my hometown and just very grateful that I got this.
That's wonderful. It's great. I mean, so many people I think are sort of escaping their roots and or don't talk about them enough. And that is what has made who we are. And so talking about them, sharing them, and being proud of them is so critical. And so I want to, if you don't mind, I want to dig deeper on that because we're talking about your origins. And in that intro, I talked about what you're up to now with La Cienega Advisory. And so I'm curious about the journey that led you to HR and that has been sort of fueling what you're doing now in this space.
So I love the question, right? And I think I even get emotional with it because La Cienega, the name came from my grandfather's and my grandmother's ranch in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
Sierra Sonora. So unless you're from there, you don't really know how to get there or where it's at, right? But I loved it. It's such a humbling beginning to hopefully something that will be greater and which much more impact, right? So I named my advisory after the ranch because I truly believe that you can be the most accomplished, wealthiest individual in the world, but if you're not humble enough, if you're not kind enough, that doesn't really do much for you, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
human beings and we depend on one another. So for me, being able to take back to my roots and say, hey, I'm having a business now, something to move forward with, but its origin comes from them, from
Mm-hmm.
individuals that literally came from nothing. My grandfather started working when he was 5 just to make the food to put on the table, and my grandmother was his right hand. So when I go back into that history and then realize how far I've come, I do truly say it's because of them, right? They had a strong ethic that they instilled in me, and that's what's led me to say, hey, I've done all this work in HR, I've done all this work for others, but what has that done for me? And what
Mm,
quality of life has that allowed me to have? And although there's a financial commodity to it, there's been a piece of reality and humbleness missing from a lot of what I've done, whether it was for profit or nonprofit. So when I got to this point where I had to figure out, am I looking for my next role or am I going to do something for myself? It kind of felt a little easy to say, I want to do something for myself, especially
mm,
because I wanted to have meaning, and I wanted to have meaning just not just for myself, but for the people around me and for my community. Because I've had the opportunity to meet others that are in my similar shoes, right? Like first generation, trying to figure it out. And it can be a struggle to live in two worlds and see where you can fit in the best.
hmm.
So that's kind of what has led me to this point and why I'm passionate about it, because there's truly meaning behind it, right? Not just for me, but for my family, for my grandparents, to honor them, everything they've done and accomplished, but also to hopefully help others and to help them realize, like, we can do this. It's tough. It's really difficult. It's not really made out to sometimes be an easy road for somebody that might be first generation or lacks certain resources and things like that. But there is a community out there,
Hmm.
community that has led me to this very moment as well. So that's what I'm taking from it, and that's where it's coming from for sure.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I those roots that lead you to kind of have that moment of clarity where you're like, I want to do something for myself. That is a powerful moment in anyone's life. And as you've discovered, no doubt, and I discovered about 12 years ago when I had that similar insight of like, I want to create something for myself. It's this wonderful, exciting place to be, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of commitment. It's a lot of uncertainty. But I love that you're sticking to it and you're thinking about it from the standpoint of community and how can I support others like me and how can I bring them forward. And that's truly one of the reasons that I started doing this too, because I was in the corporate world for years and just wasn't really very happy and wasn't feeling satisfied. And I just had my first son was born right around this time, and I was just like, there's got to be something more that I can do with the knowledge and the skills I have to help people and really help them reach their potential. And I think that that's what's powerful is that notion or that idea of helping others improve and find what they love and find something that's joyful and impactful for them. So congratulations, that's a big step.
It is, and it's definitely, like you said, scary and challenging. But it's amazing when you find that community and the individuals that want to support you. They're out there, right? You just have to,
Hmm.
hey, you got a minute? You want to help? Can you help? And I can guarantee you, just out of my personal experience, most people are like, yes, I'm there. What do you need? And that's something else that I loved. And it's, as you're speaking right now and you're saying, we want to help others and we want to be there for others. That's something that was really instilled in me from my grandparents to my aunt, my mom and my aunts. I've always admired how much they truly give to others. Like, they're not selfish in any way, shape, or form. And it's something that when you get to a point in even in corporate, right, you see how much of a lack of empathy there can be at
Hmm.
times in some of these environments. It's like, wait, like, I understand this is a business, but we're also human. Like, and especially with HR, right? I think it was not something I grew up thinking, oh, I want to be in HR, but somehow I got put into it. And then when I realized what HR was, and I was pretty good at it because I had that sense of commitment to people, right? I was okay with helping folks. And I think that's what led me to this path of saying, okay, like, HR is my career. But ultimately it's been one of learning how to service others without overdoing it for yourself, right? And it's a balance there too, and I think that's been a journey for me. I'm grateful I had the background and the women in my life to say, hey, you can help others and you're going to be fine, nothing bad's going to happen to you because you helped somebody else. But also the willpower to say, like, let me find a balance to that, right? Because I can't pour from an empty cup. So love
Hmm.
hearing and love hearing those reminders too, because we do forget. We get so much into the business part of what we're doing that we forget the why behind it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've all had experiences with HR in different roles throughout our career, but I was really made aware of just the importance of that role a few years ago, connecting with just the people from Disrupt HR and getting this perspective on this space and realizing that so much of it is very much, it's kind of administrative, it's very kind of clerical, and we check off the boxes and we cover ourselves, and realizing that the human in HR is often overlooked, and that understanding of and having empathy and compassion and kindness and recognizing that everyone is going through their own experience. And I've had a number of conversations and guests on who've talked about the fact that, HR is not what it used to be. And in terms of like, now you bring your whole self to work. This notion of like, well, you leave that stuff at home. We're at work now. And the realization that all of those things impact how you show up. And so being able to kind of have those connections and have that empathy are so critical. So I just love that you and other people are stepping up and saying, let's stand up for human beings. Let's stand up for human connection and building relationships. It's so valuable.
And as you're mentioning that, right, it's also that reminder to me of I'm doing it because I care. I want to be seen as a human myself, first and foremost.
Hmm.
I matter as a human. I've been through my hurdles, and I feel like the same way I want to be heard, I should listen to others, and I want to listen to others. And I think that's something that I really appreciate from some of these experiences that I've had. When you have those associates come up to you and say, "Hey, X, Y, and Z was happening. I was having one of the worst days of my life, but you offered compassion and you listened, and you actually cared. So thank you."
Hmm.
And that's when I've been reminded of like, okay, there's a human need in HR, right? But there's also that piece of, to your point, where it's been changing, where I feel like the conversation behind mental health and the work
Hmm.
is also getting a little bit more momentum, or at least a little bit
Hmm.
more of a conversation. And I truly love that, because I've have had my fair share of incidences where because of mental health issues, I've either lost loved ones due to personal self-harm, or one of my was scenarios too is I had a coworker who unfortunately passed in a very traumatic murder suicide. And
Hmm.
I look at these things, I realize, oh well, there's a human side to all of this, and we've completely ignored it for years because we've had this notion of it's corporate, we got to work and you got to make
Hmm.
money, and you got to pay the bills. Don't have any time for your emotions. We don't have any time for your feelings. 8 to or 9 to 5, whatever it is, right? But come on, we got to keep going, got to produce. And that's not true, because we are a whole person. We have feelings, we have things going on, and you can't just shut it off. It's not that simple.
Hmm.
It's not a light switch that you turn on and off. So I love the fact that there's a conversation between being more humane in HR, but it's also bringing forth the conversation of mental health. And that's something else that I've seen in this community. There's such a huge drive for mental health in all these individuals that I've met, that I have the opportunity to talk with, that it really just gives you hope to say, hey, we can be better. We can create better workplaces where not only do you come to work, but you can go home at the end of the day feeling okay. And at the end of that, you're going to produce even more than
Hmm.
you before, because you're taken care of entirely and not just the piece that we need you to do.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. If you feel supported and heard in an organization or with a group of people, you will put in that extra work. You will go that extra mile. There's been lots of studies showing that, money will motivate you to a point, but beyond that, it's about the purpose and that connection. And it's interesting too. We talk about mental health because I'm a big one for this topic, and it's something I've come to late in my life because I grew up in an environment where it was emotion. I mean, it was a loving environment, but there wasn't an understanding of how to talk about emotion. There was an understanding of how to say I'm struggling or I need help. And it's always been interesting because I've often through my life said, well, my parents weren't alcoholics. They didn't, abuse me. Like there are a lot of the sort of the classic, if you will, sort of societal trauma that people think of. But what I didn't recognize is that throughout your life, you're getting all these like referred to as like little T's. Something that happened in the schoolyard, something that happened when your parents said this, or something that happened in college, or whatever it was. And those things create the narrative for who you are, and they impact those decisions you're making. And so that idea of mental health, and people are like, oh, that's for other people. It's like, if you're a human being and you've had any life experience, there's something to talk about there.
Oh yeah.
And I appreciate so much that it's becoming a topic of conversation. The stigma is no longer there. And I love that there are people like you and others that are vocalizing, whether it's their experience or others that have had these experiences. And I'm part of a few different groups, and I love when someone says that, well, I was invited to speak about X, Y, and Z, and in the course of that, I talked about my struggle with X. And then someone came up to me afterwards and thanked me and said, I didn't know I could talk about that, or I've struggled too. And this idea that we're all, as you said a few times, we're all human beings. We're all part of this community, and we all need help and support.
And that's the thing, right? Like, as you said it yourself, I've been in some conversations where my mouth just drops and I'm thinking, you've been through all that and you're okay? Like, how did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the fact to me is that you're brave enough to share. Because I've had the opposite experience where people don't share, especially when it comes to men, right? As you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be the fact that somebody did X, Y, and Z and it just that was a horrible event. It's those little small things too that can lead to a constant overthinking. If somebody
Mm-hmm.
once told you you might not be good enough, even if it's just once, but the fact that it came maybe from your mom or especially your dad, like that's enough for you to think about it for the rest of your life. And those sometimes are the things that I see specifically in men, right? That can't share it. You can't say it.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary, right? Because if somebody else hears you say that, they might say you're not strong enough, you're not manly enough. And it's like, no, we all have emotions. And it's okay to talk about it. And I think that we're in a community where we really, like you said, embrace that and we are supportive of each other. Because I've heard so many stories being shared where I'm just thinking like, wow, that was a scary thing. Like it takes a lot to say I've done this, I've done that. I've been a drug addict, I've been on the streets, things like that. I'm going through recovery. But to be able to hear that side of the story and then hear how a lot of these folks have turned it into a mission,
Mm-hmm.
an organization. And I think that's the other cool thing about our community, right? Especially in Tucson, we're big on mental health, and I just hope that that's something that continues as we move forward. That whether the funding is there from one avenue or another, we all pitch in and help, because those are much needed services, and we a lot of times don't realize it. But there's more people, including at work. I've had my fair share of employee relations and conversations where I'll have an individual just come to me and say, I need to talk. And
Mm-hmm.
this turns into a hour-long conversation about their mental health. And there's several things that I take from that. One, I'm just very grateful that you felt comfortable enough to talk to me, and that you can like literally give me your life spiel and spend all that time talking about it. But also the fact that we don't always have the resources or the proper avenue to help some of these folks, right? Especially when it comes to HR as well. As a company, you have your typical EAP services and things of that nature, but that's not always enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're in a role where you're expected to be more administrative, what do you do? Do you tell this person, I'm sorry, I need to cut your conversation short, or we're only going to talk for 30 minutes? Like, I know you're
Mm-hmm.
struggling here, but you only got 30 minutes because I got to go do X, Y, and Z, right? On a paper or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
That to me is crazy. Like how is it so easy for us to ignore somebody when they are struggling just because of the stigmas and the beliefs behind it? And that's something else that I hope to change, right? That I hope to be a part of that voice, because it matters. It makes a difference. Literally listening to somebody and just letting them vent, could mean the difference between them doing something, harming themselves eventually, right? Things like that, to
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, I had a great conversation and maybe I want to have that conversation again. I felt better. Let me keep trying. And that's something else too that I think we're missing, not just in humanity, but at the workplace. I've seen it quite a bit of times, and it's something that I'm saying, hey, we need to change that, right? We need to make sure we have not just the resources, but the actual attitude and the actual kindness to say, I'm here, here's some resources, how can I help, how can we provide some guidance, and not just give you a paper and move forward.
Absolutely. And I think it's, you touched on it, that people are like, kind of like, well, our time is up, or, oh, I've got to do this administrative thing, or I'm only allowed to talk about X, Y, and Z. I can't really get into that. And I think it's starting to rub up against this, what we might call sort of uncomfortable, messy, scary conversations. And whether it's that someone is not trained for it, whether they are not, from a legal standpoint, allowed to quote unquote talk about it, I think it's also an underlying human component, which is, and I think especially amongst men, but a lot of people that like, they don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to. And so they're looking for a way to avoid. They're looking for a way to, placate, like, oh, it'll be okay, or it'll work out. And as you said, it's sometimes you just have to listen. And you don't, I mean, a lot of times it's not about like, and I credit my wife with teaching me so many things in my life. But one of the things she said to me many years ago, and she said, don't try and solve this problem, just listen to me. And I've always remembered that. And it's been powerful when I'm, raising my children and working with, individuals and coaching them, that a lot of time it's like, don't solve this, just listen. And
There,
that's sometimes what all that people need is, no one's listened to me before. And here we are.
here we are. And that reminds me so much. And it's true, right? Because if we look at the information, we look at the data, we look at the research. I think back specifically to the is it Sean Covey's the 7 habits of effective people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of them is if I'm gonna say this correctly, speak and then be understood, right? And same thing, it's saying, hey, take really the time to be present, take the time to really listen to somebody, don't interrupt them, let them get through their story, and then at the end, if there's something for you to give back to them, then there you go, but at least you listened. And
Mm-hmm.
we're in a habit of cutting people off and not really listening to everything. And like you said, we're starting to have this conversation and we're already trying to like answer back, and it's like, wait, they were never asking you to answer back, they were asking you to listen. So how can we be better at programming ourselves to do that, so that we can be just a better help, right? Because we don't need to solve other people's problems, we can't, first and foremost, but we can listen and help them just feel better about themselves, and hopefully give them a way to think about their own issues, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to solve it yourself. But being able to talk through these issues, being able to put them out there and just get your brain to work through them, will give you a lot more clarity. And I think that's essential too. So like you said, we don't have to solve everything, but definitely listening is a huge piece.
Yeah, it's almost sometimes, depending on the relationship, and I've had this with my kids, where it's like, I just use the 3 H's, where it's like, do you want to be heard? Do you want to be hugged? Or do you want to be helped? And
Yeah.
sometimes that's really powerful, especially I've noticed with my teenagers and when they were younger too, that many times they don't want to hear your perspective. They're not looking for you to fix it. It's just that, like, I don't know who else to talk to, and I'm having a moment. And that can be so powerful. And you've mentioned community and Tucson a few times. I want to give a big shout out to the Tucson Thrive community and Frank Vidal and everyone there, because I think it's a great example of, this isn't a clinical setting. This isn't, an HR meeting. It's just a group of people from diverse backgrounds coming together. And Frank has done a great job creating a space where people feel comfortable. And you and I have both been there and listened to people talk about, pain and challenges and drug addiction and other things that have gone on. And I'm still taken aback
Mhm.
every time I hear someone that is that willing to share and be vulnerable, and at the same time talk about sort of what the journey has been after that and what they've learned and how they're turning that into something. And I love that, and we need more and more of that. And I've only in the last 2 years been discovering those sorts of conversations. And I mean, I'm 52, and it's like, what was going on the previous 50 years? Like, I don't think, other than going to a therapist, I don't think that was ever a topic, or an open space.
And you know that what's something so interesting, I in the intros and all that you were speaking of, as you mentioned, right? I went through a recent job
Mm-hmm.
loss,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, in the moment that it happens, you're thinking, "Oh my God, this is horrible," and there's all these things that come to mind, right? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of our nature too. It's been about 5 months so far,
Mm-hmm.
and though it hasn't been the simplest, I am just beyond grateful because it hasn't been that hard, right? In the sense of I'm okay. I've got a home. I've got food, got my basic necessities. That's
Mm-hmm.
thank God. That's the start. But outside of that, I've been able to join a community of individuals that just brings so much knowledge and compassion and just different points of views to the world we live in, and it's so essential right now to really be open minded and to hear all these different perspectives. I think it's probably one of the most needed in the moment, and to know that there's a space, to have a space and a community that allows for that, right? I know
Mm-hmm.
that conversations have ranged from drug addiction to mental health to taking care of the elderly, and to your point, I'm blown away every time I'm a part of these conversations because I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks, oh, I went through that too, or oh, that's happening as well. And when it comes to the workplace, there's just this expectation that you leave it at the door, and it doesn't work that way. And obviously, talking to all the professionals and individuals that we speak with, we realize that, right? And it's pretty evident. Like, we don't have to do a survey here. Everybody has said it. As much as I want to try to leave home at home and work at work, it doesn't really work that way, right? Because we're human. So I think that's the great part about this community. And what I've enjoyed the most is it's helped me feel confident in saying, okay, I don't want to go back to a typical role where I'm just a
Mm-hmm.
person that's acting on behalf of, but I want to get into a role where I can take all my experience and say, hey, because I've experienced X, Y, and Z, both as the employee and both as the HR practitioner, how can we change that? How can we make it better?
Mm-hmm.
Not just better for the business, but for the individuals, right? Because at the end of the day, just from hearing our stories, so many of us have been in places where we truly feel like we've been wronged, right? We've been kind of pushed out in a way, and we're just thinking to ourselves, like, did I deserve that? Did I do something?
Mm-hmm.
Was it my fault? Of course it was my fault, because why would that happen? And it's like, hold on, we're hearing that a little too much. It can't be everybody's fault, right? There's obviously something wrong with the system. There's always obviously something wrong with society when there's so many of us that come together to say, well, I had to move away because it was literally draining me to the point where I didn't know who I was. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a bigger conversation there as well. And I just hope that the fact that there's these communities where we're comfortable to have the conversations really impact the way that the businesses around us allow us to help, because that's truly what we want to do, right? Both in the conversations like what you do, both in the events like Disrupt HR, right? There's been so many conversations of let's be human, let's be
Mm-hmm.
kind, let's be humble, let's come together and help each other. And it's such a beautiful thing that unfortunately you don't really hear in corporate. So how do we help change that? And it really does take a village. So I'm just really glad that I found some of that, right? I found a village that says, hurrah, let's talk about mental health and let's talk about our well-being as professionals. And let's also talk about how we can help others be better off as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the the way I always think about it is that everyone in their own little or big way, depending on their influence, is doing their thing. And so whether it's through Holly and Tamika hosting like Disrupt HR, or whether it's through Frank hosting the Tucson Thrive, or me in this podcast, or you in the work that you're doing and the circles you move in, that collectively is changing the narrative. And I was talking to my wife about this last night, that is foremost for me is how do we change the narrative around these topics? Because clearly, what we're seeing in sort of mass media currently is the opposite, the exact opposite of what we're talking about. But that's not the majority. I think that's just those with the megaphones right now. And so I love that we're all in our own way starting to create these conversations in these spaces. And so I wanted to, talking about helping each other. And you've obviously got some extraordinary personal experiences and a perspective as well as professional experiences. And so I'm curious what, for those listening or those watching, what type of a role are you looking for? Are there particular organizations or industries or things that would really be things you'd want to be doing?
I'm, definitely open to finding a role in which I can be that employee relations, that more of a strategic partner. As much as I've enjoyed the clerical aspect of things and feel comfortable and capable, I have found, I think, in my recent years that I'm actually good with people. I can listen to folks, I can help folks out. And that has been one of the best realizations, especially when they come back to you and say, hey, because of what you did, X, Y, and Z, I'm thriving in X area, or I'm feeling better from this aspect, right? And that's something that I really did enjoy. I didn't, always enjoy the conversations of she did this and she did that, but when they come back
Mhm.
to you and say thank you for helping, or thank you for creating a solution to X problem, that just reminds you that you're good at that. So that's the part where I miss that human connection, because I truly do believe that not everybody is comfortable in that aspect. And I know that it's something that can be difficult. It can also be draining, right? Because at
Mhm.
the day, as an HR professional, all you're doing is listening and you're taking it in. You can't always have an outlet, so it does take a certain type of individual to say, let me be that person, let me be the unofficial HR therapist, because
Mhm.
that's what that is, right? So that's something I'm comfortable with and I've enjoyed. And I think that based on what I want to keep doing, just makes the most sense to me, right? Because I told myself that I wanted to create a better HR process, a better, not a better, but kind of reframe that HR perspective, right? Because there's a lot
Mhm.
of times where they say, well, HR is the bad guy. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
I'm not the bad guy. And, or when associates come to you and say, well, I don't come to HR because it's HR, but do you know me? Have you given me an
Mhm.
opportunity to talk to you? Right. So I definitely want a role where I can have that impact still, where I can be that ER or strategic person, to say that business partner, to say, hey, as a business, how can we get people to really work together so that our business can grow together? Because if there isn't community within our coworkers, if there isn't an alignment there, we're going to keep clashing constantly. Right. So more of those roles, and I think that really aligns with the fact of what I want to do with the advisory, which is continue to advocate for that mental health. Right, there's a lot of ways,
Mhm.
especially nowadays. I think there's opportunities to help folks rather than just handing them a paper and saying call this 1-800 number. I think we have good
We've all
opportunity.
been there, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, and the sad thing is that I've had to do that as well, and I didn't like it. I didn't like having to have this conversation about, X, Y, and Z is going to happen to you. It's such a negative thing. Like, I'm sorry, I'm destroying your life basically in one way or another.
Mhm.
Here's this paper. Call them and see what they say.
Mhm. Just
I'm like,
pass the buck.
there you go. So I really want to reframe from that. I think that to me that was one of the most exhausting experiences, to feel so limited on
Mhm.
how properly help others. And that's really where I'm focusing on my next role, right? I'm not going to say, like many of us have said, I don't want to say yes to just a job. I want
Mhm.
to say yes to a profession, a contract, whether it's a full-time, whether it's an individual contract, something that really is for change. I want to work with individuals that care about their employees, right? That doesn't mean you're going to cater to them to the point where you only do what they say, but
Mhm. Mhm.
cater to them to the point where they're happy. They want to come to work. They want to be there. They're not trying to rush out the door. And I think for that type of environment, you definitely need to work in a place where the leadership is on board more than anything. It doesn't have to be nonprofit or for profit. You can be in either industry. It truly comes down to leadership being open minded to the fact that we need to help our employees. Let's give them a resource to do that. And it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It just has to be put together, well thought of, and it has to be embraced, right? Specifically from the top down.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I first of all, anyone listening to this, you got to reach out to Yahaira and get in contact. And uh, I've had multiple conversations. We've met in person. I watched you on the Thrive conversation, and you have so much to offer and so much value. And for what it's worth, I have had conversations with dozens and dozens of people that I respect, people that I've worked with, people that are highly accomplished, and they're struggling right now trying to figure out where that next role is. And so it's absolutely not you. It's not them. It's this industry and this market that we're in right now. I think that we are seeing sort of a purging and a shift. Like they're going to write about this shift decades from now in terms of it being, I believe, a move in the right direction, but it's shedding a lot of stuff right now. And so I know that the right opportunity is out there. It's just finding that key person in that relationship, because I don't think it's probably going to be, through a job posting.
Yeah.
It's, many of the people I'm interacting with, it's like they're networking and they're reaching out, they're talking to past colleagues, and then they find that needle in a haystack like role that, like, well, we haven't posted it yet, but we're just about to do X, Y, and Z. And so it's out there. It's
Yes.
out there. I know it is.
Thank you. And same, right? Like I said, it's been a tough journey, but it's that hope that you're connecting with the right folks, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where I have that like peace of mind, that even though I'm not doing a daily 9 to 5, I'm having these amazing conversations, and there is truly nothing in the world that could replace any of these. So that's where you get that glimpse of hope and say, hey, I'm gonna keep going forward because something will show up. But I don't want it to just be something. I want it to be the right thing, right?
Yep.
Because like you said, I feel like all the folks that we've been speaking with, and all the professionals that are going through something similar, we've all kind of said it, right? I want it to have meaning. I want it to matter. I don't want to be a robot anywhere. And I think that's probably the most important thing when it comes, to the humane side of who we are, and to
Mm-hmm.
mental health. We can't perform being a false version of ourselves, or just always put on a mask. Like that's just draining. So I'm really glad that, like you said, it's not just me, but there's a lot of us that are going through that shift, and that understanding. And hopefully that leads to a collective where we do embrace each other, help each other out, and just create better workspaces for everybody.
Absolutely. And so, for anyone who is listening or watching this, I've put Yahaira's contact info in the post. And is LinkedIn the best way to engage with you?
Yes, I'm definitely learning to use my LinkedIn as best as possible. And it truly has been such an amazing resource. Kind of reminds me of MySpace back in the day, but better.
Ah, there you go. Throwback. Very
Yeah.
cool. And so I'm curious. So we've talked about, the professional side. We've talked about mental health. A lot of things there. I'm curious, what do you do for fun? Like, what is a release for you that's kind of just joyful and you don't have to like overthink it?
I love visiting my family in Mexico. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents, well, my grandmother, unfortunately, my grandfather passed away about 7 months ago. Um,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
my grandma, she's such a positive woman. Like
Mm-hmm.
I admire her so much because she's been through so many things in life. Like she truly should be somebody that's like old and bitter. She's the opposite.
She's earned the right to be old and bitter.
Mm. And she's not. She truly is not. She's not a person that dwells on things, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really try to think about when it comes on mental health. And even myself, I try to take her example.
Mm-hmm.
She's somebody that doesn't constantly like dig to the problem, right? She just doesn't really think about the past, no matter how hard or
Mm-hmm.
difficult it's been for her. And truly spending time with her right now has truly been the highlight. Hence the reason why I'm like, you know what, as long as I'm okay, I'm not in a rush, the right thing will come. But in the meantime, I'm gonna enjoy her and enjoy the nature, the scenery, and
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I'm glad you've got that individual, you've got that safety, because that's where you start to see the opportunities that are there before you. And well, I want to be respectful of time. We started about 15 minutes late. That one's on me, and now we're at 10 minutes over, and that's just on us for having a good conversation. But
love it.
um, one last question for you is, uh, if there's one thing that you could be remembered for, what would you like that to be?
That I was genuine
Mm-hmm.
and helpful. It's there's a difference to being kind. I don't want to just be kind. I want to know that I did my part to impact,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a small thing, listening, or giving, some words of encouragement, to maybe potentially, I don't know, helping with groceries. I think that we all have a true power in impacting somebody else's life, and changing it. And I truly believe that sometimes even just listening to somebody can be the difference between having the strength to continue, and the strength beats behind not continuing, right, in
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I want to make sure not only that I do for myself and the ones I love, but hopefully give that example enough to where we all can be kinder to each other in that sense, and just allow ourselves to listen to those that need us, because it's more needed than we realize.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today and sharing your journey and your ongoing exploration of new opportunities. And I appreciate you, and I'm so glad that we got to chat. And so thank you.
I appreciate it as well. Like I said, it's been an amazing community, and I think that there's so much value to the conversations that we have, and it's just great to hear these themes. They were things that I was concerned about in the past, right? I was even scared about talking about. But the
Hmm.
more we interact and the more we talk about it, the more I realize like this is needed and this is important. So it's really great to have these conversations.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I thank you for sharing. And with that, I'll let you get back to your day. But thank you again, and have a wonderful Fourth and a good long weekend.
Thank you, you as well. And again, really appreciate your outreach, your time, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Definitely, I'm always available for conversations. This is what I love to do. So good luck, and for everyone out there, if you, as I said, reach out to Yahaira, get in touch. You will not be disappointed. This will be a wonderful conversation. So thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye. All right, everyone. So thank you for sticking in with us today. We went a little bit longer than usual, but I think you'll agree it was valuable. So big thank you to Yahaira for joining us and sharing of herself. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you'd like to see the replay, it's available on LinkedIn and YouTube, or the audio-only version is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all those other great places. So if you're on any of those, please give us a follow or a subscribe. Excuse me, a follow or a subscribe on your preferred platform, and please share it with your friends. And join me for the next Impact Tribe podcast on Thursday, July 17th, with my special guest, David Landis. David is an entrepreneur, former firefighter and paramedic, and creator of the transformational self-mastery and the 9-to-1 influence principle. After decades of solving life or death problems for others, David hit his own breaking point and discovered that success isn't about working harder, but thinking differently. So we'll explore how top performers can beat burnout, overcome self-sabotage, and finally shift the odds in their favor. So do not miss this powerful conversation. And before we go, a shout out to our sponsor, MakerTank. Visit makertank.com today to join the exclusive Founders Waitlist. And until next time, everyone, thank you for creating a positive impact in your world. Together, we can make change happen. Cheers, everyone.